Hello, everyone. Welcome to Play for Performance. Today, I'm so excited to introduce Natalie Born, founder and CEO of Innovation Meets Leadership. With 2 decades of strategy consulting experience across 18 countries, Natalie helps organizations transform bold ideas into market ready results. As an author of Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation, and holder of 2 US patents, Natalie specializes in facilitation that breaks down silos and sparks creativity. Her approach aligns with our LEGO series play principles, using structured play to drive breakthrough thinking. Through IML Advisors, Natalie moves companies from survival mode to systemic growth. Today, we'll explore how leaders can build in innovation foundations, create collaborative spaces, and maintain curiosity while achieving practical results. Welcome, Natalie. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so awesome to be here with
Yeah.
you and your listeners today.
Yes, absolutely. And for those of you that know Natalie and follow her podcast, I was on her show a couple weeks ago. And so we're going to kind of continue our conversation and focus more on what Natalie does in the innovation space. So, real quick, what sparked your transition from traditional strategy to the innovation facilitation?
Yeah, it's interesting when we think about teams and getting teams together. And then, oftentimes I would have teams for, a couple days and thinking about all the work that needed to be done ahead of us. I realized, we could do some things differently. And if we're going to be together this long, we should have fun while we do it. And so, really, I just wanted to kind of create a practice where we're able to get the very best out of each and every person. And we talked about this, Jolynn, when you were on
Yeah.
my podcast, but people are wired differently. And because they're wired differently, they have different needs, different ways of thinking, different thinking preferences, and different ways of working. And so, what I love about what I get to do as a facilitator is really not only learning which ways people enjoy working and thinking, but then using that understanding to actually draw the best out of each and every person at the table. And I find that to be fun.
So, doing that across 18 different countries is yet another testament to the diversity of how we learn and how we are. How has that helped shape any of your work as well?
Yeah, I'll tell you an interesting story. I used to work with this team pretty regularly in India, and I would ask them a question, and it would take a little bit of time. Like it would relay all around the table, and then one person, usually the team leader, would answer. And I remember sitting on the phone just wondering, like, I wonder why this is taking so long to get a response. When I went over there to work with them directly and visit with them, what I realized was that they were collaborating live in the room, and then when they had a final answer, they were giving that to their leader. And it just, again, it made me realize that collaboration looks so differently in every country. Like if we were in the US, people would be screaming it out and yelling on top of each other. And well, wait a minute, what about this? And just to see the organization of thought just going around the table and being like, no, not that, this. Well, what about this? No. Okay, yes, this is our answer. It fascinated me. And that's part of the reason why I love this work so much is because even culturally, right, we show up a little bit differently. So if we're in a room with different cultures, the speed at which an American talks is faster than the speed at which sometimes other cultures talk. So how do we create that space for other cultures to be able to jump in and provide their thought leadership, even though Americans may speak at a faster speed? So we have to kind of slow ourselves down so we can get all the voices in. And that became this really fun and cool puzzle of like, how do we solve this in the facilitation and in the work that we do?
So, a visual that came up when you first mentioned the team in India was the end of the Family Feud episodes. Not the end, but the when the both sides have done something wrong and they have to come up with one answer and they all kind of talk and funnel it to that front person and that person shares and that's not always the right answer. Sometimes they get it wrong, but still using that, like you said, we're all going to talk about our ideas and then present them. I think, and you're right. I've seen it too across different backgrounds and cultures. We all come to the table with our unique situation and our unique development over the years, so we have something different to add to the solution.
Yeah.
So how do you balance structure and creativity when you're facilitating these innovation sessions?
I love that question because that is actually a real challenge to do. And you'll see at certain points, depending on what topic we're trying to tackle, let's say we're tackling a process. I will tell people in the room, hey, if you're not process oriented, this portion of the exercise is probably going to exhaust you. If you are process oriented, you're going to love this part of the exercise. Like you're going to feel like you just moved a mountain, like you just got so much done. And I think part of it is letting people know that, we're all wired differently with different energy for different tasks and different things. And so letting someone know in advance, like, hey, if you're not wired for this, you're going to feel the energy drain. But don't worry, we're going to get to a topic after that you're really going to enjoy. And I think that, there is hard work in all the stuff that we're doing, right? And it's not to shy away from that, but we can also let people know like, hey, this topic, we're going to try to make it as fun and interesting as we can. But you're probably going to feel a little bit of a drain if you're not wired towards thinking deeply about processes. And so, what I try to do is get people broken up into teams. I get them moving around the room. I get them moving physically from one side of the room to the other. So we're not just sitting in a conference room staring at a PowerPoint all day being PowerPointed to death, which would none of us like that. I don't care what your thinking style is. None of us enjoy that. And so, really us being able to lean into movement as part of facilitation, us being able to move into even smaller groups where maybe we can get our voice heard a little bit more on certain topics, and then being able to come back and read out what we're learning and sharing that across. Those are all to me fundamental ways of facilitating that can kind of break up things that are really hard, or let's say really long, like hey, we're going to do process all day. Five people just passed out. Let's talk about how we're going to do it in a way where it'll actually be more interesting.
Well, and I like how you give them permission to, this session may not be how your brain works, but stay tuned because there will be a time later that you'll be able to click into. And I think a lot of people don't think that way or have never been given that permission before to not be forced to strategize. Like everybody, some people just don't work. I'd be guilty. I don't work that way. My brain does not strategize. But let me tell you, once the plan is in place, I will be the one that's leading the charge to implement, etc. But to give them that permission and say, if this is not you, it's okay. Stick with us, and we're going to do more other things later. They're going to tap into that space. I love that. So speaking of, what role does failure play in your innovation framework, and how do you help those leadership teams process those setbacks?
Oh, failure is such a big part of innovation. I feel like, we don't talk about failure enough, right? We look at all the people who've succeeded and done so well, and we think, man, I can never be like so and so, right? Insert the name. And what we don't realize is that there were so many failures along their path to success. And one of the things I talk about a lot is that, if we hide our failures, we never get to learn from them. But if we'll actually expose that failure to the group, then we can be successful at figuring out what did and didn't work. And I once worked with this team. Psychological safety was really, really low.
Ooh.
And I asked the question, I said, hey, we all know that this failed. Let's talk about why. And I want you to do it from the lens of what could you, as an individual on this project, have done differently. The first person raises their hand. Well, so and so. I said, hold on, wait a minute. We're not going to talk about so and so right now. We're talking about you. What could you have done differently? The room got really quiet. And I realized that we don't have psychological safety. Everyone was afraid of being fired. Everyone was fearing for their job. And as a result, we didn't have the ability as a team to learn. And so we had to just pull the bus over, and I had to say, okay, we've got to spend the next couple of weeks building psychological safety, because if we can't look at this failure, we're never going to learn. We're never going to grow from it. And so we had to, it sounds kind of cheesy, but we had to team build, because you can't learn from failure if no one feels safe on the team. And if they feel like, well, if I raise my hand and say I failed, I messed up, I'm going to get fired. If I have that mentality, I will never learn from my mistakes.
Yeah. Wow. And I normally have my Lego elephant, but that elephant in the room on so many teams that they're not willing to look at, or they're not willing to address, that if we just talk about it and get it out there. And that's so great of you to say, we've got to create a safe space here for these people to get this out and to work past it. I think that's so important. And we see that a lot in Lego Serious Play as well. They kind of timid back. They're like, I didn't know this was going to be a counseling session. And it's not. It's just whatever comes to your mind, right? And however you want to process those things. So what trends do you see emerging in organizations, and How are they adapting to those innovation processes?
Yeah, it's interesting when we think about trends within organizations. I mean, for one thing, there's been a couple different organizations that I'm working with that are really, really surprised that certain people in the organization don't want to get to the top rung. And that I don't know why it's a surprise, but it is because we're seeing a group of people who want flexibility. They want autonomy. They want agency. And sometimes that does not go hand in hand with a true kind of traditional corporate role. And so we're having to start talking to organizations about how do you build in flexibility? How do you build in some of these elements that actually make people feel drawn to the organization? Because now everyone has, 4 or 5 or 6 side hustles that equal the one thing that they're doing to be successful in life. And so people have opportunity, and with opportunity, it really forces, especially corporate, to rethink the structure in which we've built our whole ideology, our whole philosophy on, and say, where can we break down some of these things in order to allow those innovative people into our organization? Maybe it looks a little different, but how do we invite and allow them in a way where they can engage and interact with the rest of us, if you will,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
still get the initiatives done? We're having to think differently about talent. We're
Yeah.
having to think differently about AI and how that's changing the landscape. And so there's so much right now, I think, where corporations feel the pressure of not only automating and getting AI in fast enough, but then how do we deal with people who may not want to climb a corporate ladder or may not feel called to go up to the highest rung
Yeah.
within this structure that we've created? How do we still get good talent? How do we still engage them? And that is kind of the topic that we're spending a lot of time talking about right now. It's a trend.
Yeah, and you mentioned people having side hustles. A lot of times those side hustles are feeding them in a way that their other job doesn't. And so it really is a good thing for them. And it's something that I would think that we would want to encourage and support. And so often we go back to the old ways of this needs to be your job, this needs to be your career, your focus. Like you even said, the corporate ladder, your next, where do you want to go next? And some people are like, I'm good with where I am. I just want to be really great at this. And it's kind of a disconnect with some corporate leaders. I've read some recent articles about that too.
Yeah, well, let's talk about why, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes in these side hustles, it's where they're actually finding that outlet of creativity. It's
Yes.
where they're actually finding an ability to express themselves. It's where
Mhm.
they're actually finding an extension of being able to grow outside of their comfort zone. And so I think we have to relook at work and say, are we providing people a place to be creative? Are we providing people a place to grow outside of their comfort zone? And if not, why not? And then what
Yes.
do we need to do differently to structure things in a way where people feel that they can learn and grow within this
Yeah.
environment?
And for some reason, creativity, if you're not in marketing, is not part of your job. So please don't do it. Where when we activate that prefrontal cortex, that creative part of our brains, we actually get more thought processes that come through. We open up more brain power and we're able to really contribute more. So by stifling that creativity piece for so many people, it's really hindering success, in my opinion. Nobody really asked, but that's okay. And you just mentioned artificial intelligence. So how do you see that coming in and the automation reshaping the, traditional problem solving skills?
Right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is such a big topic for all of us right now. I mean, if you look at it on there's the macro and the micro level, and there's so many different elements. Let's maybe take the corporate scene first and kind of talk about it that way. We do see people who are maybe reluctant to engage in AI. We do see that they are going to be left behind, unfortunately, or lapped. And so, but then we have this juxtaposition where we're very frustrated at all the ways AI is coming in and kind of taking the humanness out of everything. Um, AI is number one on some music charts right now, and it's not a real artist, it's AI. And so we're seeing so much in the landscape change so fast. And so what I'm typically talking to organizations about right now is, what is your strategy on AI? Because whether you have a policy or a strategy or not, please know that you've got a ton of team members who are using it, and they may even be bringing that back and integrating it into your environment, whether you want them to or not. So we really do need to instead of kind of hiding in the sand or just being left behind, we do need to be creating forums, talking to teams about how they're using AI, and then looking at places where it makes sense to leverage automation and AI if we're not doing it today. But I think there's this other side of it. And I was just talking to somebody recently about kind of the dark side of AI. There is this dark side of AI, and we're seeing it in, the way that it's being deployed. I mean, look at the app Sora, where you can upload someone's image and likeness, and they could be robbing a bank and it's not really them, or they could be, cursing someone out and it's not them. But how long and how many, looks at that video does it get until we realize, oh, that's a fake video? And so
Mhm.
it's altering, actually, AI is altering our reality. It's altering what's true, what's real. And so if organizations are not thinking about this, if we're not ahead of it, and we're not thinking about kind of what's the strategy and the structure we want to put around this, we're going to have some real challenges with what information is spread, and whether or not we actually believe that information is real, right, or true. It almost is coming so fast that it's already out there as truth before we can stop it. So
Yeah.
organizations who are not thinking strategically about AI, they're being left behind. And so
Yeah.
it's not to say that we need to adopt everything, but we do need to be sitting down, getting forums of teams together and talking through, how are you using it? What are you doing in our system with it? We need to be having these conversations.
And there's also a component to that of like trademark secrets or intellectual property secrets that are being put into AI and then used on a more personal level and not as professional. And I think you touched on it, for companies that aren't embracing it and acknowledging that that's happening, that's going to be to their detriment moving forward. So many companies have created their own AI to keep their trade secrets in house so that they're protected. And my cybersecurity background's coming out a little bit. Sorry about that,
Yeah.
but it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy right now. So, leadership mindsets, obviously accepting and understanding AI. What are some other mindsets changes that might be critical as we look forward to those with those leadership teams?
Yeah, I think, we touched a little bit on the future of work. I think we
Yeah.
touched on AI. I think that what we're seeing here in the landscape is a mass change in the philosophy of the way that leaders lead, right? We have baby boomers who are retiring at a pretty rapid rate right now. Typically, in that season of leadership, it really was a command and control. It was, do as I say. Um,
Mhm.
my way or highway. It was a lot of these phrases that, you just don't hear anymore in
Yeah.
leadership. And now we're moving to more of a collaborative workforce. We're moving to a workforce that does not ask you a question if they have a question. They ask the internet, they ask Chat GPT,
Mhm. Yeah.
they ask Google, right? They're not talking directly to you. So now what we're trying to figure out in the workforce is, how do we transfer leadership skills? How do we transfer knowledge? Because what's happening is someone reads something that is information, and they instantly are now trying to transfer it to wisdom. And
Mm.
unfortunately, there's this gap in between where it's like, right, but you haven't actually implemented that, seen it fail, tried 5 things to make it better, saw it
Yeah.
fail again, and then saw it succeed. You
Uh,
read it in a textbook or online, and now you're trying to implement this thing or talking to me like you can implement it
yeah.
without actually having that wisdom that's built over learned experience and time. So
Yeah.
this is actually interesting, because now that we're in this deep information age where information is coming at us so rapidly, we actually have to build in the deep leadership skills and the deep
Mm.
kind of communication skills that you get over time, that people are not finding, is coming kind of up in that next generation. We're having to figure out different ways to build that in to the experience, so that they can not only get that information, but then how do we help them translate that into true wisdom, which only comes by doing. It only comes by putting your hand to it and actually doing it.
And partner that with those that don't want the leadership role. They just want to be that's a big challenge and a big piece of how to mold the leaders of the future.
Yeah.
Those are some great thoughts. Thank you so much, Natalie. So facilitation for you, how is that going to evolve with artificial intelligence? Will that modify anything that you do, or
I'm gonna be sending my AI to every meeting. No, I'm just kidding. One of the
check
one of the
in?
Right. Like I'm here, my avatar is here to facilitate with all of you. One of the things that I saw that was really interesting in 2020, which was just kind of I think, a taste for us learning kind of how to facilitate differently. We saw people in homes overnight who had to figure something out different in terms of how do we engage, collaborate, and facilitate. And then we started using the word asynchronous. Oh, we can just get everything done asynchronously, right?
Mhm,
Like I'll
mhm.
send this doc over to you, you'll work on it, and then when I wake up, I'll
Ah,
work on it, send it right back. And so
yeah,
through that, we've lost a little bit of the humanity of what it means to truly collaborate with one another, be in the room together, enjoy each other's company. And, you can't replace those water cooler moments where you step outside of the meeting and you start
yeah.
talking about things like family and life and all these other
Mhm,
pieces that you wouldn't normally get online. And so part of what I've been doing in my practice is trying to figure out how do we bring those moments, how do we converge them when, let's say, I'm facilitating with a group across 3 or 4 countries, right? How do we
mhm.
get them to have those water cooler moments that actually build trust, which then builds deeper collaboration? And it's harder to do. And so, that's why I love the work that you do, because it really does kind of open up the mindset where we're looking at different challenges, we're trying to solve for different issues, and sometimes out of that comes these unintended conversations that you don't expect. And that's
Yeah,
really what we have to build in. And so as a facilitator, I really strive, especially when I'm online, and let's say I'm using like Mural or something like that to facilitate across
yeah,
multiple continents. It really does become, how do I build in those times where people can actually connect with one another? We almost have to build them into the schedule. Like, this is
yeah.
going to be 5 minutes of connection time with somebody that you don't know, so that we can actually collaborate better.
That's
Because
huge.
honestly, nothing beats being together. It just really still doesn't.
You're exactly right. It's especially those that are wired to be around other people. They need that to feed them to do great work.
Yeah.
So, what is one of your favorite hands-on tools or creative exercises for breaking the ice with executive teams?
Oh,
Mm,
some great ones. One that I think is I'll give you two different ones. There's one that I think is really effective, which is open, explore, close. It kind of looks like a two-tipped pencil, right? Where
mm,
we just open and we put as many ideas out there as we can when trying to solve a problem. Maybe we group or affinity map those items together and kind of create some groupings of, okay, well, your idea is very similar to this one. Let's group those together. And then we kind of take a moment and we step back and we look at that and say, okay, of all the things we've put up here, what is it we actually need to be talking about? I actually give them voting stars. And I always have to tell them, like, no, you cannot rip your star into four and create four votes. Like, they get so creative, and you're like, no,
yeah,
it's one vote.
exactly.
What is the topic we need to talk
Mhm.
about? And so from there, you find this level of buy-in and this camaraderie to actually have the hard conversation, now that we can see, okay, we're all, speaking of your elephant, right? We're
Yeah,
all thinking about the same elephant in the room.
yeah,
So now that we can all agree we're talking about the same elephant, let's go ahead and talk about it. And
yeah,
so having that process to get people to that thing they need to and want to talk about is so critical. The other way that we can go about doing that is what's right, what's wrong, what's working, what's not, right? So we almost kind of group it into 4 quadrants, and
mhm,
then we kind of talk about it that way. But the goal is, how do we get to meaning, and how do we get to the same understanding of what we really need to be tackling today?
yeah,
Because oftentimes we don't want to talk about the elephant in the room. So, well, if so
yeah,
and so doesn't say it, I'm not saying it. And then we waste 2 hours, right? Because no one will say the hard thing. And so
mhm,
I find that that open, explore, close, it just forces people out of their comfort
yeah,
zone, get them up moving and putting
nice.
stickies. You can have them think of as many items as they can. But then
Yeah,
what you find is the true ones that we really need to talk about is what actually surfaces to the top.
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thinking about your two patents, what unexpected moment or playful experiment led to one of those breakthrough innovations?
Okay, so so the patent process is so it's a lot tougher, I think, than people realize if you haven't gone through it. And then there's points in that process where you literally feel like, we'll never get this patent off the ground. Like
Mhm.
there's a point where the patent attorney calls you and is like, yeah, so there's nothing in this that's not, it's all obvious. And if you're not creating something that's like, non-obvious, then you don't
Right.
have a thing.
Ugh,
And it's really in that your team has to go back to the drawing board and dig a little bit deeper. It may
mhm.
not even be to change what you invented but to better articulate it.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the tipping point where you're either a good team or a great team. A good team's like, well, he's probably right. We should just hang it up and go home.
No,
Great
yeah,
team says, all right, we've got to dig deep.
yeah.
And so one of the ways that, that I've found we've had so much fun with this is like, okay, pizza's ordered, Red Bull's ordered. Let's get this figured out. And
Yeah.
like we're locking ourselves in this room to figure out the solution and just finding, not only do you get delirious at some of those points, which that part can be funny, but eventually you have this aha moment emerge where someone's like,
Mhm.
hold on. This is the part that is, non-obvious about what we do that is so unique and so interesting and so different
Yeah.
than everything else that's out there. And when you have that moment emerge through deep work, I mean, it really is deep work that we have to
Yeah.
do, then you actually find that your team is like, okay, we can tackle the next thing because we figured this out together. And I find it's through that process of actually getting the rejection that we find a way to rise above.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. I've heard that the US Patent Office is just this warehouse full of documentation on documentation on that they can't really do anything with because they have to keep it safe and secure. And little side note.
I'd never want to be in an office with that much paper.
Yeah, no, me neither. I just think about it. I'm like, ugh,
Mhm.
cringe, because I know how much it takes to get the patent. I know how much it takes to get to that point, and that's crazy times. All right, so fun questions. How do you convince leadership teams that incorporating fun and strategy into the strategic planning sessions is going to work? How do you convince them that this is the way to go?
Okay, so this is really interesting. I do a lot of work with HBDI, so Herman Brain Dominance Instrument. It looks at thinking preferences.
Uh-huh.
So typically, if I have somebody that is blue or green, blue, just think CFO brain, ROI, return on investment, or green, process folks. They're honestly the hardest ones to convince that fun should be a part of the environment. So you really have to share the return on investment. So I usually, when I'm dealing with someone who is green, process, or blue, return on investment, what are the numbers, bottom line, is I'll typically bring in some stats on, why do teams that have fun collaborate better, faster, achieve more. You actually have to show them the return on investment. They have to see that. They have to understand it.
Yeah.
Typically, if they're yellow on the HBDI, they're big picture thinkers. And so they don't really struggle with, yeah, that makes sense. I can kind of
Mhm.
synthesize that and see that. And then our red people are actually people, right? So they will buy in instantly if you tell them we have to have fun. So it's
Right.
really just showing them stats or return on investment that really helps with that.
A call list of just the red people would be
Yeah.
great, right? Exactly.
That's
Just
all you
sign me up.
want is the red
That's
people because they will just be like, "Oh yeah, let's just have fun all day. Isn't that the what we should
yes.
do?" And you're like,
Right.
"Yes, but we are also gonna get some stuff done,
If
which is great."
we have to make money for the company
That's
that we're
right.
working for, right? Exactly. So are there specific techniques that you use to inject that playful energy into the traditional serious corporate work?
Yes. So I do a lot with drawing and visual thinking, which is kind of funny because I'm a horrible artist. Like, let me just be the first to tell you that you will struggle to know what your sticky note is doing with the little, man on it. You'll be like, is that a man or is it a house? What is that? But I'm not the best artist, but you don't actually have to be. It's really, and you talk about this, and when you came on my
Yeah.
podcast, you talked about the creativity of drawing or just moving or your hands, and there's so much in that. And so teaching people to tell a story about where they want to go or how they want to get there through drawing is actually a really powerful thing that unlocks, one, things they didn't know about themselves, and two,
Yeah.
things the people around the table didn't know about them either. So
Yeah.
when you have somebody draw something and then tell us about it. I was working with this team and this guy said, "Oh, one of my values is fun." And the whole room turned around and stared at him. And they were like, "We never would have guessed that." And I'm like, okay, so what do you need to do to pull this value that's so important to
Yeah.
you forward? Because no one else in the room realizes that that is a value that is so important to you. And so,
Yeah.
so often, through drawing or through explaining things, we can actually give a deeper understanding or a deeper meaning to us, our work, why we exist, why we show up. And in that, people learning about you and you getting to hear about them, that is, to me, it's part of the fun of the work we do.
So much
And if I work
value.
with you every day and I don't know what makes you tick, if I don't know your kids' names, if I don't know anything about your life, then I personally have failed as a leader, and as a coworker to actually dig into the thing that's so important about the work we do, which is the
Yeah.
why behind the what we're doing.
Yeah. The creative piece. I use books to build all of my Lego sets. Like I don't just it's so hard for me to just start putting bricks together to build something.
Mhm.
It's good for me and I challenge myself, but I never thought I was a creative person either until I get into this work. And it is so, I mean, what you're able to unlock in those drawings or in these builds is just you wouldn't have ever known that had you not done that exercise. And I think that's so valuable to so many teams. So humor, where does humor come into all of it, Natalie? I mean, I know that you've got some moments where you're like, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
what
I
does that look
think,
like?
what's so important in facilitation and in just leadership is we have to show people that it's okay not to take ourselves too seriously and that we need to have some lightness and some levity in these
Yeah.
meetings. And I think that facilitators actually lead the way in showing that that's okay. When you are the one kind of commanding the room and kind of orchestrating what's happening, being able to build in times to laugh, times to breathe, times to reflect. Like all of these things are so important as facilitators. And oftentimes, we may go into it very task oriented. Okay, I only have 4 hours and we have to get all this stuff done. But what is the experience that people are having as you're leading them through that? And the more comfortable, the more relaxed, the more at rest they are, the more innovative, the more interesting the solutions will be that we'll arrive at. And so
Yeah.
oftentimes our job as a facilitator is to come into an environment that might feel a little bit stuffy
Yeah.
and make it lighter, make it more
Mhm.
interesting. And so I just, I find that even personality wise, who you pair together can create those little funny moments, because if you take the person that's so detail oriented and put them with the person that's so big picture, you'll have a good laugh as they share kind of what they worked on together, because they
Yeah.
are polar opposites. And that's really what you need, I think, in order to be innovative sometimes, is somebody that's looking at it and thinking about it completely differently than you are, because you'll actually find that you arrive at solutions you never expected you arrive
Mhm. Exactly. I love that. So, two questions I always ask my guests. The first one is, when was the last time you played with Legos?
at.
Has it been a little while? Do you have kids?
I do. So I have two girls. So
Okay.
it has not been that long since I've played with Legos, but the last time
Mhm.
I stepped on a Lego was last week. And we know how bad that hurts. But
I it's funny. I should knock on wood. The only time I ever stepped on Legos was for a charity project, so I'll leave it at that. Yeah, stepping on Legos is not fun, and that's always a big thorn when people come in and see the Lego bricks. They're like, "What? We're not stepping on it, people. We're just, And you talked about humor and some of the minifigure heads. When they start rolling on the tables, I'm like, heads are going to roll, and they just get a kick out of that. So, do your girls build, or do they just have them at the house in case they get inspired? Or
yeah, they both do. So they
okay,
both are really creative. Like they both love art, they both love to build and create, and so it's super
nice.
fun to watch them build and create. And I was actually walking through the airport the other week and I saw that they now have a kiosk where you can buy Legos. And I was heading up to the Sky Lounge and I thought, should I buy myself some Legos?
Yes, yes,
Literally
you
was like
should.
right there. And so yeah, I mean, they love to build, they love to create, and I learned
Mhm.
so much from them. I mean, what's interesting is when I was writing my first book, I had my artist fall out, and I asked she would have been, I want to say 13 at the time, 13 or
Mhm.
14 when I launched my book. She did all
Mhm.
my art in the book.
Oh, that's
And it
great.
was amazing just to see her. I'm like, "Okay, this is what I want," and to see her draw it. And so that's to me the power of Legos and building is that it gives you this level of creativity that you can then extend into these other areas. And so seeing them build stuff and them showing me what they're building
Yeah.
is so fascinating. And I don't feel like I'm as astute as they are in that skill. But I just remember growing up too, my brother was big with Lego building, and you would go down into the basement and we had this huge plywood that just went from like it covered like almost like a 6 foot or 8 foot table. And he
Yeah.
would build these like massive, like it was
Ah,
like the Death Star and like all this Star Wars stuff,
yeah.
like he would really build it out. And so you
Ah,
just realize how create like that is such a creative
yeah.
angle from
Yeah.
which we can work from. And it
That's
extends
great.
over into other areas.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing, especially about your daughter, right? Illustrating your book. That's amazing. Um, I have three girls, the two, three, and my oldest is very creative. She does her own, like paints her own Christmas cards each year. I'm like, it's just so, she didn't get it from me. So here we are. And my second question is, you have acquired a big bag of tools, let's say, over your time of facilitation and leading teams and working with corporations and leaders. Is there one thing from your toolbox that you would advise our listeners to take with them today? And what would that be?
The biggest thing that I've learned is so critical in facilitation is empathy.
Mm,
Like, I just love empathy, and not just for the people that you're facilitating in the room, but actually transferring their ability to think
mm,
empathetically for whatever we're doing. So, one of the tools I love to use is an empathy map, and, I'll ask them to go around whatever solution, whatever thing we're rolling out.
yeah.
Okay, who are we rolling it out for?
Mm,
I'll even ask them in the next week, who are you going to meet with where you're about to share something with them that's going to completely change their world. And let's get
mm,
empathetic and think about the conversations that you need to have. I was once working with a hospital system on an empathy
yeah.
map, and one of the ladies said, "Oh, wow." She said, "I was about to ask the pharmacy to just revolutionize the way they do everything because where I came from, that's how they do it." And
Uh-huh.
she's like, "What I haven't realized is that this person who's running this area has probably created all these systems and processes and ways of working over a number of years. And now I'm just walking in very nonchalantly telling them, we need to change everything." And she
Right.
said, "I can now see by looking at this empathy map that
Yeah.
that's not going to work. And I've got to find another way to bring up this conversation, to lead her into the conversation, and then to actually be open to listening and seeing maybe my way is not right. Maybe there's a hybrid. Maybe there's some things that we can do to make small incremental improvements. I don't have to necessarily come in the first conversation and tell her, I'm about to blow up your world.
Right.
Congratulations on what you built for the last 10 years. We'd like to change it.
It's garbage.
Yeah. So this
No.
idea of empathy is so powerful because I think it
Oh,
helps people understand not just their angle, what they want, what they need, what they want to do, but it actually turns it and looks at what is the person I'm about to sit across from? What do they need? And how can I have a more powerful, better conversation with them that's going to help
yeah.
us work together better, be more collaborative and more effective?
I love that. I'm gonna absolutely look it up because I've never heard of it before. Empathy is my 34th strength, which is the very bottom. I don't know if I've ever told you this. And I struggle with it. And it doesn't mean that I can't be an empathetic person. I have individualization that's higher. I've got harmony that's higher. I've got other strengths, but there's times when I know that I have to willingly engage my empathy really to just understand, like you said, what the other person may be going through or what brought them to that place to begin with. So that's
Yeah.
huge. Thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely. I was going to tell you, I do
Yeah.
have a free downloadable on my website
Ah,
at
okay.
setitonfire.co. You can go there, click on the frameworks. Empathy map is one of them. You can
Perfect.
actually download it. It's 2 pages. The empathy map's on the front, and then the directions are on the back. And it's something you can print out anytime you're going into maybe a tough conversation
Yeah.
or maybe a conversation you're dreading and you're trying to think about, man, this person seems like they're going to be very resistant. It
Mm,
forces us to ask those questions below the surface. Okay, why are they resisting? Ah, okay, this is their real need. If I can tap
yes.
into their real need, we can actually have the conversation we need to have.
Oh, wow, that's great. Thank you. This has been so amazing, Natalie. I almost feel like we should schedule a third session to follow up again from you are so phenomenal. I love your work. I love the things that you're doing in the world. And How can our listeners find you? You mentioned your book, your website. Go ahead and tell us that again.
Yeah. So you can head over to setitonfire.co, and I've got free frameworks there. So feel free to download any of those frameworks. I've got a framework on change management, I've got one on empathy, and of course, other areas around innovation. But I just love these frameworks because I think in frameworks. So I kind of need some help to be like, okay, how should we think about this, challenge we're trying to solve
Yeah.
today? So, and then of course you can follow me on LinkedIn at Natalie Born.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure. I will be in touch very soon. For our listeners, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you soon again on Play for Performance. That's a wrap on another episode of Play for Performance. I hope today's conversation sparked some ideas for how you can bring more joy and engagement into your workplace. Remember, transforming workplace culture doesn't happen overnight, but every small step toward play and connection makes a difference. Try one thing we discussed today, even something small, and see what happens. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who could use a little more play in their professional life. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our weekly conversations with incredible guests who are changing the game of workplace engagement. Have a guest suggestion or want to share your own play at work story? Reach out to me at Jolynn at elevateyourtalent.co or find me on LinkedIn. I love hearing from you. Until next week, keep playing, keep performing, and remember, work doesn't have to be taken seriously to be serious. This has been Play for Performance. I'm Jolynn Ledgerwood, and I'll see you next time.